We are going to see a recording setup, a biomedical recording setup that can be useful for analyzing the muscle activity. Where it can be useful? It can be useful on plenty of places, like especially for the sports persons who are undergoing a severe activity that is related to these muscles. And recently you might have heard, not recently, some years before, we might have read some news in the newspaper related to Muttaya Muralidharan, the great off spinners, action and all. Those things can be analyzed as well as studied by using the EMG. Not alone this, but also it can be useful for understanding how effectively this muscle is functioning. In case if there is a problem in this nerve conduction, etc., that can be easily picked by using the electromyograph. So we all can recollect one important thing, that this muscle is this muscle has a capability of producing something called action potential. And what is an action potential, how it is being created, those things we have already discussed in the class. So EMG is a technique for evaluating and recording this electrical activity that is being produced by the skeletal muscles, right? And this can be performed by using an instrument called electromyograph. Previously we had EEG, and the recording instrument we call it as electroencephalograph. Here this is being called as electromyograph, right? And typically, as one can say, a muscle which is under the resting condition may not be able to show any electrical activity because it's not producing action potential, unless or otherwise it has been triggered electrically or else neurologically. It is not going to produce electrical potential. As we all know, the muscle is capable of producing action potential, and the body is made up of a group of muscles. So that means the summation of all the action potentials which have been caused by the individual muscles is called, it can be termed as motor unit action potential, and it's an important university question. You can note it down. As such, EMG recording and analysis are extremely powerful, and it can be applicable for so many areas, as I mentioned in the previous slide. Some important, very specific applications are these: to identify the health status of a motor system, B, to localize and typify peripheral and central abnormalities and lesions. Say in case if we have a lesion that has been formed in between the muscles, that is going to cause an abrupt, that is going to cause a blockage of the this electrical activity from reaching from one muscle to the other end. So that means there is a problem in the muscles. It's as simple as that. And this can be picked by using EMG evaluation. Also, it can be useful for determining the temporal course and severity of the motor system and abnormalities. And of course, it can be useful for evaluation of the effectiveness of the treatment strategies. You are giving some treatment and how effectively it is working, that can be picked by using this EMG also. This slide shows you an EMG setup. Here we can use different types of electrodes which we have studied in the class. Maybe a surface electrode to pick up the group of the muscle activity, or else if you want to pick up one set of muscles activity, then you can go for the needle electrodes. Those things it has been shown here. As I mentioned in the previous slide, the type of the electrodes which can be useful for measuring the EMG activity can be surface as well as needle electrode. And of course, one thing which we have to keep it in mind is the activity or else the action potential which exhibits from the muscle is very, very minimal, and the amplitude will be very, very minimal, making the analysis extremely tough. Because EMG is one such signal, which will make the analysis extremely tough. It's not like EEG where you can have a distinction of the frequency patterns. It's not like ECG where you can have a different set of patterns, say for example PQ or ST, right? And we have the amplitude in ECG, and this time duration, and even the shapes also will convey a lot of messages, lot of informations. But in EMG, it's going to be extremely tough because it looks almost like a noise actually. So this thin amount of, or else this tiny amount of potentials have to be amplified significantly. But what happens next? Once you amplify the signal, there comes the noise. So it's going to be extremely challenging. A lot of research is going on in the EMG side. Here we have a high gain amplifier, and the range of the high gain amplifier is from 10 to 5000 hertz, as it has been mentioned in the slide itself. And once the amplification is being done, it can be either recorded or else it can be displayed in an oscilloscope. And I hope you remember the basic block diagram which we have discussed in the class for any biomedical setup. In case if you are forgetting the block diagram that is related to one set of equipment, you can go for the general block diagram, make a random guess that is related to the particular body part, and you can write the answer on your own. So that's plan 2, not plan A. Plan A is to study the thing, right? And one more important thing is that is very unique when compared to other recording setups like EEG and ECG. Here we can convert the EMG to an audio signal, and it will be heard as a murmur, and these murmurs can reveal how effectively this muzzle setup is functioning, how effectively the muzzle is useful for this conduction of the this pulses or action potential. Those things that can be actually picked from the audio signals. So this is one unique thing about the EMG. And as I told earlier, EMG is a very tiny signal, looks almost like a noise. So shielding that particular room is very, very important, because there can be interferences which can spoil the original signal. So that can go that can make the analysis extremely tough. So interference is absolutely not permissible. So that we have to protect the particular room by using shielding, all those things. Again, this slide shows a person being evaluated for this muzzle conduction. The setups are there, and of course you can see on the left side that they are using a needle electrode, because they are analyzing one set of muzzle for its conduction. As I have mentioned in my previous slide, this is a block diagram that is useful for recording the EMG setup. And as in any biomedical case, we need an amplifier, and that too in the case of EMG we need an amplifier for sure, and that amplifier should not be noise prone also. So the designing of EMG amplifier itself is a research area. And also I have mentioned in my previous slides that this EMG can be recorded or also displayed in the form of oscilloscope, and recorded using these magnetic tapes. We call it as a tape recorder. And not only that, the most unique thing is we can convert this EMG into murmurs or else audios. So it can be heard in a speaker, and this murmur sound gives you the diagnosing values. These murmur sounds will reveal how effectively this muzzle has been useful for conduction of any muzzle activity or any action potentials. This slide explains us some of the factors that affect the measuring of the EMG. The most important factor, this technical factor, should be the type of the needle which has been used, because the material which have been used for this construction of the needle electrode, that matters actually. That matters in evaluating that output, because that can affect the output very significantly. And the types of material which can be useful for constructing these electrodes have been already discussed in the class. AG, AgCl, and a lot of this tungsten, as well as gold, platinum, iridium, and so many types of materials have been used effectively on just constructing these electrodes. And also the second important factor that will affect the recording of the EMG should be the characteristics of the recording surface, because the impedance matching, all those things will come into the picture. And third thing is the electrical characteristics of the cable. That's also there. And also it depends upon the pre-amplification as well as amplification technique as well, and also the method of recording. These are the important factors that will be considered before recording the motor unit potential. And there are some physiological factors. The factors which I have discussed in this top of the slide, that are related to the This technical aspects. Now I am discussing about the physiological factors that also need to be considered, because the age of the patient is very critical, because an young guy will have a rapid connection of this action potential from one muscle to from one location, one proximity, one location of the muscle to the other location that is there. And also it also depends upon the location of the muscle which is under examination, and also the temperature under measurement. These are the three important physiological factors that is going to affect the end result. So finally, in this particular slide, we are going to discuss how a nerve conduction velocity experiment can be done. Because nerve conduction velocity will reveal us how effectively that action potential is progressing from one location of the muscle to the other location of the muscle. So what we do is we have two electrodes. You can see the picture. One is the S1 electrode and another one is the S2 electrode. Let me highlight it. This one is S1 electrode and another one is S2 electrode, right? And these electrodes have been set on a known distance apart. That is the distance between the S1 and S2 we have known already, and from one electrode we will be giving a stimulus, artificial electrical stimulus, and very sure that electrical stimulus will be progressing through the muscles and it will be reaching the other set of the electrode which have been placed on a known set of the distance, right? So of course it takes some time. Now this time where exactly you pass the electrical stimulus and the time which it reaches the second electrode, that gives you the important information about the nerve conduction velocity, because a nerve conduction velocity can be calculated by the ratio between distance as well as the difference between latency 2 and latency 1. I hope it is clear. If you want, I can explain it one more time. Two set of electrodes placed at two different places, the distance between these two electrodes, we know it already because it's a standard distance, and in one electrode we are passing this electrical stimulus. Of course the electrical stimulus will take some time to reach the other electrode. This particular difference on the time latencies that we will calculate, and the ratio between the distance that sets apart the electrode 1 from the electrode 2 with respect to the latency, the difference between the latency 2 and latency 1 will tell me how effectively that nerve is being conducting. So that gives you the nerve conduction velocity. So this is how we measure the nerve conduction velocity. It's very important because of two important reasons. These definitions, which I am going to discuss in the next two slides, have been repeatedly asked for the university exam. I have never seen a question paper without a definition, without a question that involves the definition of these two slides. It's one thing, and also these definitions carries a lot of social importance as well. So be watchful. The first important definition is the tidal volume. It's nothing but the volume of the gas inspired or expired during the normal quiet breathing. In the class itself, I have told you breathing is nothing but an involuntary action. That means without our knowledge itself, we automatically breathe. And this is point number one. Point number two is lungs is nothing but an air bag. It stores the inhaled, it stores the breathed air, stores the inhaled air. And point number three, very important point, is we generally don't utilize the maximum capacity of the lungs. We use only the partial amount of the lung capacity, and that's the reason we are studying these definitions. If we are inhaling fully, if we are using the maximum capacity of the lungs, nobody is going to bother about these definitions. That's the important point, right? And there are few researchers going on this particular topic also. I have read a magazine stating that doing pranayama. Pranayama is, I hope you know that pranayama is one of the yoga techniques. Doing pranayama purifies the blood immensely, thereby the entire day you will be feeling very energized. And in the particular article explains in this way, the pranayama allows you to breathe more amount of air, and the particular, more amount of the air enters into the alveolar chamber, more amount of diffusion process will happen, and the more amount of the diffusion process will allow you to clean the blood in a much better way. That means purified blood will always make you energized, right? So that may be one reason why yoga is a universally accepted process now, universally accepted exercises now, right? And the second important definition is the minute volume. The volume of the gas exchanged per minute during the quiet breathing is called the minute volume. Otherwise, it can also be called as the tidal volume multiplied by the breathing rate. Tidal volume just now we have discussed. And the third important, the definition is alveolar ventilation. It's nothing but the volume of the fresh air entering the alveoli with each breath. We know lung has a alveolar chamber, right? These things we have discussed in the module 1 itself. And AB, the alveolar ventilation is equal to breathing rate into tidal volume minus dead space. And dead space, the definition of dead space comes in the slide 2, that we will discuss it later on. Tidal volume has been we have just now discussed. And the next important topic, perhaps this is the most repeatedly asked definition, inspiratory reserve volume, IRV. They have asked a lot of questions. I have seen too many questions actually, too many question papers where they ask inspiratory reserve volume as well as expiratory reserve volume, right? So be watchful about that. So it's nothing but the volume of the gas which can be inspired from a normal and tidal volume. So the formula for calculating the inspiratory reserve volume is IRV is equal to VC minus TV plus FRC. What is FRC? What is VC? That we are going to see it in the next slide, right? In fact, FRC is nothing but the functional residual capacity, and VC is the vital capacity. That we are going to see it shortly. And expiratory reserve volume, ERV, it's nothing but the volume of the gas remaining after a normal expiration. Volume of the gas remaining after a normal expiration. That means every single time you inspire, every single time you expire, still some amount of the gas have been saved inside the lung capacity. You are not exhaling completely. That tells you how ineffectively we are breathing, right? So these two important definitions, IRV as well as ERV, have been repeatedly asked in the university, so be watchful. And ERV's formula is FRC minus RV. RV is something with the residual volume. Of course, we are going to discuss it in the next slide, right? So RV, in the previous slide I have mentioned something called RV. It's nothing but a residual volume. Residual volume is nothing but the volume of the gas remaining in the lungs after a forced expiration. Look, forced expiration is something like this. Something like this, right? Normally we don't expire like that. So once after the forced expiration, in case if still some amount of the gas has been left over in the lungs, then we call it as residual volume. That means the amount of the gas still that is left over after the forced expiration. And the next definition is the FRC, functional residual capacity. It's the volume of the gas remaining in the lungs after normal expiration. This is not the forced expiration. After the normal expiration, what is the amount of the volume of the gas that has been still left over in the lungs? Now the total lung capacity, again a very important question. Total lung capacity, they used to ask this particular question numerous times. The total lung capacity is nothing but the volume of the gas in the lungs at the point of maximal inspiration. Maximal inspiration is not your normal inspiration. Maximal inspiration is something like this. I will enact it. This is not maximal inspiration. Still still I can inspire something more. Still I can inspire. Now this is called maximal inspiration. So what I would like to say is this TLC, that is the total lung capacity, is the volume of the gas in the lungs at the point of maximal inspiration. That's the maximum amount of the gas which you can inhale, the maximum point, right? Just I have enacted. So TLC is equal to VC plus RV, the vital capacity. Again, in the previous slide I have mentioned something related to the VC, because IRV, inspiratory reserve volume, also basically depends upon the VC. It's nothing but VC minus TD plus FRC. I hope you could be able to recollect, or else you can go to the previous slide and check it out. Right. So vital capacity is the greatest volume of the gas that can be inspired by the voluntary effort after maximum expiration, irrespective of the time. Look, vital capacity. So what does it mean? Here, one important word that you have to note down is the voluntary effort. Generally, we don't do it. Generally, we do it involuntarily. So it's a conscious effort which you are doing. So this is the greatest volume of the gas that can be inspired. Greatest amount of the volume of the gas that can be inspired with a voluntary effort. It's not a normal effort, it's a voluntary effort, right? So the next one is the inspiratory capacity, the maximum volume that can be inspired from the resting and the expiratory position. Now the dead space is the functional volume of the lung that does not participate in the gas exchange at all, irrespective of the forced expiration, irrespective of the forced inspiration. Right, at any point of the time, some amount of the space inside that, the gas chamber, that is nothing but the lungs, it won't participate in the breathing activity at all. So these are the important definitions as far as these respiratory parameters are concerned. Spirometer is a very popular device which have been repeatedly used for measuring the efficacy or how effective this lung is functioning, and it tells you how effectively the lung is inhaling the air and how effectively the lung is exhaling the air, and also it will tell you how quickly our lungs is exhaling the air, right? And the spirometers are repeatedly being used for diagnosing asthma and COPD. We call it as chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and other conditions that affect the functioning of the lungs as well as the breathing. Spirometers may also be periodically used to monitor your lung condition. Look, when you are going under some treatment, if there is a side effect, that is going to surely affect your lungs, and spirometer can be used for checking that also, right? Whether your treatment is affecting your lung functioning or not, those things can also be checked. Now this slide this slide pictorially represents you how a patient will undergo the spirometer test just to check the efficacy of the lung functioning. Look, I hope you notice there is a clip on the nose. So we generally don't waste even the tiniest amount of the gas, right? That's the reason for the clip on the nose. We don't waste even the smallest amount of the gas, which we generally use it for exhaling as well as inhaling through the nose. So that's the clip. That's why the clip, right? And the patient generally will be asked to take a deep breath, and this is one test. And in the second test, generally the patient will take a deep blowed breath, like something like that, blowed breath, and into the tube. And the particular tube that particular tube will have a transducer, and that particular transducer, and this will be communicated with respect to that particular machine, and that machine will show the results of the spirometry test. This is one of the oldest spirometer that have been invented, and this particular setup contains an oxygen chamber, and oxygen chamber where it has been sealed, of course, and we have, as the picture suggests, and the picture is a self-narrative one, and the picture suggests there will be two water chambers, and the amount of the water that is present in the tube is known to us, so known amount of water, and the patient will be asked to breathe inside the oxygen chamber through the tube which have been fixed, and while inhaling, very sure the floating drum which have been connected to the oxygen chamber will move upwards with respect to the breathing, inhaling or else exhaling, and how deeply he is exhaling, how deeply he is inspiring, these things will be reflected on the kymograph, because there is a counterbalance weight, you can see that, and it's it is hanging in the pulley, and as soon as the patient inhales or exhales, very sure there will be a movement in the counterbalance weight, and based on the amount of the expiration as well as inspiration, you will get a graph in the kymograph. It's a very simple process. And generally we use spirometer for examining the chronic lung conditions like asthma, COPD, just as I mentioned, and chronic bronchitis, emphysema, and pulmonary fibrosis. Anything that is associated with the lung disorders, so can be used. And one more type of spirometer is the ultrasound spirometer. I leave it as a homework. So tonight you have to go through that. And for tomorrow's exam, I may ask from the ultrasound spirometer also, right? So we are going to discuss anemometer now. So it's called a heart anemometer for some reason, and the heart anemometer is basically used for measuring the velocity of the breathing, or else we call it as a breathing rate. As the picture narrates, we see a Wheatstone's bridge along with a wire, this conducting wire that has been strategically placed inside the pipe, and the patient will be allowed to breathe inside the pipe only. Use the rheostat, adjust for a known amount of current that will cause known amount of the heat inside the coil that has been placed inside the pipe. Now the patient will be allowed to breathe inside the pipe. That means some amount of the gas will flow inside the pipe. That will significantly affect the temperature distribution of the particular pipe. And in order to bring back the original temperature which we have already preset, use the rheostat, adjust the value of the current, and bring back the original temperature which we have set initially. And the amount of current that has been required to bring back the original temperature back, and that have been calibrated in terms of the breathing rate. So this is how we measure the velocity of the breathing or breathing rate. So this is what I have explained in the previous slide. It has a small heated element in the flow path, that is the wire. We call it as a wire in a pipe, and the current we have to maintain the element at a constant temperature, right? That I have mentioned in the previous slide. And whenever there is a change in the temperature because of the breathing or else because of the gas flow, that's going to upset it. So we have to bring back the current in such a way that the same temperature will be again regained, and the amount of the current which we utilize for regaining the temperature back, that is proportional to the gas flow. This is how it works. So tomorrow morning by 10 o'clock we will be having the test class, online test. I expect you people to write the test honestly. Please do not copy it down. I had numerous ideas like M test and all because of I feel some faculty didn't like it, so that's the reason I have dropped that idea. Otherwise, that particular app was a great one. So anyhow, so tomorrow this is how I am going to actually conduct the test. Exactly by 10 o'clock, I will be giving you the set of questions in a PDF format. You'll go through it, write it, take a photograph, and maybe like a cam scanner, just convert it into some PDF form, and then again submit it to the group itself. Right? Good luck.